Imagine being the weakest species in a galaxy full of warriors. Your planet, nothing more than a backwater footnote in the cosmic directory. Now imagine that weakness was the greatest lie ever told. What happens when a galaxy built on strength discovers that the quiet human sitting in the corner of the bar isn't just another harmless primitive, but something far more dangerous than their worst nightmares? In the Andorian sector, where power is measured by the thickness of your armor and the size of your claws, Marcus Chun appeared to be exactly what every alien expected: soft, slow, and utterly forgettable. The Galactic Council had classified humans as a minor species, barely worth a footnote in their databases. No natural weapons, no enhanced physical abilities, no psychic powers. Just another weak civilization stumbling through the stars. But sometimes the greatest predators are the ones you never see coming. Sometimes the most dangerous weapon in the universe is the one hidden behind a friendly smile and patient eyes. And sometimes underestimating a human doesn't just go wrong. It reveals a truth that will shake the very foundations of galactic civilization. The bar fight that started all seemed so simple. A drunk Vorthack warrior, a few insults about human weakness, and what should have been a quick, brutal lesson in galactic hierarchy. Instead, it became a moment when the galaxy learned that humans had been hiding something extraordinary. Something that would make every species question everything they thought they knew about power, evolution, and survival. What they were about to discover would change the balance of the galaxy forever. Because Marcus Chin wasn't just any human. He was what humans could become when they stopped pretending to be weak. The Nexus station buzzed with the constant hum of 1,000 different species conducting business across the galaxy. In the lower levels, where the air recyclers worked overtime to filter out the mix of atmospheric preferences, the Rusty Comet Tavern served as neutral ground for anyone with credits and a thirst. The establishment catered to the rougher elements of galactic society: smugglers, mercenaries, traders operating in the gray areas of interstellar law. Marcus Chun sat in the corner booth, nursing a glass of something that tasted vaguely like whiskey if whiskey had been filtered through the digestive system of a Rigelian sandworm. His plain brown jacket and unremarkable features made him blend into the background. Just another human trying to make his way in a galaxy dominated by beings who could crush him without a second thought. At least, that's what everyone assumed. The Vorthack at the bar had been drinking for the better part of 6 hours. Kelvik was his name, according to the slurred boasts he'd been making to anyone within earshot. 7 feet of muscle, bone ridges that could stop a plasma bolt, and claws that could slice through titanium. He was everything humans weren't. Physically superior in every measurable way. Evolution had gifted the Vorthack with strength, speed, and natural armor. Humans got opposable thumbs and a tendency toward back problems. Another round for the table. Marcus called to the bartender, his voice carrying that particular accent that marked him as being from Earth's northern territories. The aliens serving drinks, a 6-armed Zalani with compound eyes, nodded and began mixing another round of the establishment's signature drinks. At the next table, a group of hegemony traders were discussing the latest shipping routes through contested space. Their conversation drifted over the general noise of the tavern, mixing with the translator static that helped bridge the gap between dozens of different linguistic structures. Marcus listened with half an ear, his attention mostly focused on the datapad he'd been reading. Trade reports, shipping manifests, the kind of boring documentation that kept the galaxy's economy moving. The Vorthack's voice grew louder. Humans, Kelvik spat, his words thick with alcohol and contempt. Weakest species in the galaxy. How did they even survive long enough to reach the stars? No claws, no funks, no armor plotching. Just soft pink skin that tears if you look at it wrong. His drinking companions, a mix of species from the outer rim, laughed along. It was a common enough sentiment in this part of space. Humans were tolerated rather than respected, useful for their adaptability and willingness to take jobs that others found beneath them. They served as translators, go-betweens, and general laborers. The Galactic Council classified them as a developing species, which was diplomatic speak for barely worth noticing. Marcus continued reading his reports, but the conversation had caught the attention of other patrons. In a place like the Rusty Comet, entertainment often came in the form of watching someone get educated about their place in the galactic hierarchy. I heard, Kelvik continued, swaying slightly as he gestured with his massive arms, that humans are so weak they need machines just to open their food containers. No natural weapons at all. Evolution's biggest joke. The bartender, who had seen enough fights to know where this was heading, began quietly moving the more expensive bottles to a safer location behind the bar. The hegemony traders pushed their chairs back, giving themselves room to evacuate if things got messy. Marcus looked up from his data pad for the first time since the conversation started. His eyes, unremarkable brown in color, swept the room with the casual attention of someone checking the time. He caught the bartender's worried expression and offered a slight nod, the kind of gesture that said everything was under control. "Excuse me," Marcus said, his voice pitched to Carrie without being aggressive. "I couldn't help overhearing your discussion about human biology." The tavern fell quiet. Not the tense silence that preceded violence, but the kind of hush that came when everyone realized they were about to witness something interesting. Kelvik turned around, his massive frame rotating like a gun turret tracking a target. "You got something to say, human?" The Vorthack's voice carried the kind of challenge that usually ended with someone getting thrown through a wall. Marcus closed his data pad and set it carefully on the table. His movements were precise but unhurried, like a man taking time to consider his words. "Just that your information about human evolution seems a bit incomplete." Kelvik laughed, a sound like grinding stone. "Incomplete? Look at you. Soft skin, daltis, no clothes. What could your species possibly have evolved that makes you worth anything in a real fight?" The question hung in the air. Around the tavern, other conversations had stopped entirely. This wasn't the first time someone had challenged a human's worthiness in combat, but something about this exchange felt different. Maybe it was the way Marcus sat perfectly still, or the fact that he hadn't shown even a flicker of the fear that most humans displayed when confronted by a Vorthack warrior. "That's an interesting question," Marcus replied, standing slowly from his booth. At just over 6 feet, he was tall for a human but still dwarfed by Kelvik's massive frame. Most species assume that evolution is about developing bigger claws or stronger armor. He walked toward the bar, each step measured and deliberate. The other patrons instinctively moved out of his path, though few could have explained why. There was something in his posture, something that didn't match the soft-spoken academic image he'd been projecting. But evolution isn't just about obvious advantages, Marcus continued, stopping about 10 feet from the Vorthack. Sometimes it's about developing tools that aren't immediately visible. Kelvik's ridge-covered brow furrowed in confusion. "Tools? What tools? I don't see any weapons." "That's exactly the point," Marcus said, and for the first time since the conversation started, he smiled. It wasn't a particularly warm expression. The Vorthack took a step forward, his claws extending with a metallic scraping sound. "You're making fun of me, human. Big mistake." What happened next would be discussed in taverns across the sector for months afterward, though most of the witnesses would struggle to describe it accurately. Kelvik lunged forward with the kind of speed that had made his species feared as shock troops in 3 different galactic conflicts. His claws, each as long as a human finger and sharp enough to cut through body armor, swept toward Marcus's torso in an arc designed to end the confrontation permanently. Marcus moved, not in the way humans were supposed to move, not with the clumsy desperation of a prey species trying to avoid a predator. He moved with the fluid precision of water flowing around an obstacle, his body shifting just enough to let the killing blow pass through empty air. In the same motion, his hand came up and touched Kelvik's extended arm just above the wrist. The Vorthack's charge continued for another step before his nervous system registered what had happened. The touch had looked gentle, almost casual, but suddenly, Kelvik's right arm hung useless at his side, the claws retracting involuntarily as neural pathways ceased to function properly. Neural pressure point, Marcus explained conversationally, as if he were discussing the weather. Your species has 17 major nerve clusters that control motor function. I just temporarily disabled one of them. Kelvik stared at his useless arm in confusion that was rapidly turning to rage. Impossible. Humans don't know Vorthack anatomy that precisely. You'd be surprised what humans know, Marcus replied. His stance hadn't changed. He still looked relaxed, almost casual. We've had several centuries to study the species we interact with. The Vorthack warrior snarled and attacked again, this time leading with his good arm while his powerful legs drove him forward. The left claw strike came in faster than the first attack, powered by fury and the kind of strength that could punch through starship hull plating. Marcus shifted again, but this time he didn't just avoid the attack. His left hand caught Kelvik's wrist in what looked like a gentle grip, redirecting the momentum of the strike while his right hand touched 2 points along the Vorthack's neck in rapid succession. Kelvik's legs stopped working. The massive warrior toppled forward, his own momentum carrying him past Marcus to crash into a table that disintegrated under his weight. The other patrons scattered, though none of them fled the tavern entirely. Whatever was happening, it was too fascinating to miss. Spinal nerve cluster, Marcus said, answering the question that was visible on every face in the room. Again, temporary. You'll recover full function in about 20 minutes. Kelvik tried to push himself up with his one working arm, but his legs remained stubbornly unresponsive. For the first time in the encounter, genuine fear flickered in his eyes. What are you? It was a good question. Around the tavern, representatives of a dozen different species were asking themselves the same thing. The human standing over the disabled Vorthack looked exactly the same as he had 10 minutes earlier. Unremarkable features, plain clothing, soft skin that should have been shredded by the first attack. But the easy confidence in his posture and the clinical precision of his movements painted a very different picture. I'm exactly what I appear to be, Marcus said, straightening his jacket. A human. Homo sapiens, native to Sol 3, member of a minor species with no natural weapons, no armor plating, and no obvious evolutionary advantages. He walked back to his table, retrieved his data pad, and left a small stack of credit chips next to his empty glass. The bartender nodded gratefully. The tip was generous enough to cover the broken furniture, and then some. The thing about humans, Marcus said, addressing the room in general, is that our evolution took a different path than most species. We didn't develop bigger claws or thicker armor. We developed something else entirely. He paused at the tavern entrance, looking back at the crowd of aliens watching him with newfound wariness. We developed the ability to understand exactly how everyone else's evolutionary advantages work. And once you understand how something works, you can usually figure out how to neutralize it. The door hissed shut behind him, leaving the tavern in stunned silence. On the floor, Kelvik was still trying to comprehend what had happened to him. Around the room, various species were unconsciously checking their own anatomy, wondering what vulnerabilities they might be carrying that they'd never noticed before. The bartender was the first to speak, his multiple eyes tracking toward the door Marcus had just exited through. I think, he said in heavily accented standard, someone should update the Galactic Council's files on human capabilities. At a table near the back, a figure in the dark robes, favored by consortium intelligence operatives, quietly activated a subspace communicator. The message that would soon wing its way across the galaxy was simple. Human designation Marcus Chun displays anomalous capabilities. Recommend immediate investigation. But Marcus was already 3 decks away, walking through the station's civilian quarter with the same unhurried pace he'd maintained in the tavern. To any casual observer, he looked like a low-level trader heading back to his ship after concluding some minor business. His heart rate was steady, his breathing normal, his expression pleasantly neutral. He passed a newsstand where the headlines spoke of rising tensions between the hegemony and the Free World Alliance, of trade disputes that were threatening to become something more serious. He bought a data chip containing the latest shipping schedules and tucked it into his jacket pocket. In a rusty comet, the Vorthak warrior was beginning to regain feeling in his legs. The sensation returning was accompanied by a growing realization that everything he'd thought he knew about humans might be dangerously incomplete. Around the galaxy, similar realizations were beginning to dawn on other species as word of the incident spread through the networks that connected the underworld of the Outer Rim. Marcus reached his ship, a modest freighter that looked like 1,000 others docked at stations across the galaxy. The cargo manifest listed him as an independent trader specializing in cultural artifacts and educational materials. His destination was listed as the Kepler Collective, a group of frontier worlds where humans had established some of their most successful colonies. As his ship undocked from the station and began its journey toward the hyperspace entry point, Marcus Chin settled into the pilot's chair and activated his ship's communication array. The message he sent was encrypted with codes that would have been familiar to very few beings in the galaxy. Codes used by an organization that most species didn't even know existed. Contact initiated as planned, he transmitted. Cover identity holding. Proceeding to next phase. The reply came back almost immediately. Acknowledged. The Council suspects nothing. Continue with the mission. Marcus switched off the communicator and engaged his ship's autopilot. Through the viewports, the stars began to blur as the vessel prepared to enter hyperspace. Behind him, on Nexus Station, a dozen different intelligence agencies were beginning investigations into an incident that shouldn't have been possible. They were asking the right questions, but they were about to discover that the answers were far more complicated than anyone had imagined. Because Marcus Chun wasn't just a human who happened to know a few pressure points. He was something else entirely. Something that the Galactic Council had spent centuries trying to prevent. He was what happened when humans stopped pretending to be weak and started showing what they had really learned during their brief but intense contact with the rest of the galaxy. And if the other species were frightened by what they'd seen in a simple tavern fight, they were going to be terrified by what came next. The hyperspace tunnel opened before his ship like a brilliant blue wound in space-time, and Marcus Chun disappeared into the void between stars, carrying with him secrets that would reshape the balance of power in the galaxy forever. 3 days after the incident at the Rusty Comet, Nexus Station buzzed with an entirely different kind of energy. Where before there had been the casual chaos of interstellar commerce, now there was the focused tension of a crime scene under investigation. Multiple intelligence agencies had descended on the station like scavengers on a fresh kill, each convinced they were on the trail of something significant. Commander Zethvar of Consortium Intelligence stood in the reconstructed tavern, her 4 eyes scanning the scene with a methodical precision that had made her one of the most feared investigators in the galaxy. Her species, the Chumari, had evolved from pack hunters, and their natural ability to process multiple visual perspectives simultaneously made them invaluable for crime scene analysis. Run the simulation again, she ordered her technical specialist, a nervous Torellian whose 6-fingered hands danced across a holographic interface. The air above the bar shimmered and reformed, creating a 3-dimensional representation of the fight between Marcus Chun and the Vorthak warrior. The simulation was constructed from security camera footage, witness statements, and bioscanner readings taken from the tavern safety systems. It painted a picture that defied conventional understanding of human capabilities. "Freeze it there," Zethvar said as the holographic Marcus touched Kelvik's wrist. Analysis of the contact point. The technician manipulated the controls, zooming in on the moment of contact. Enhanced imaging showed the precise placement of the human's fingers, the angle of approach, the subtle shift in pressure that had somehow disabled a Vorthak's motor control. Pressure applied. 2.3 pounds per square inch, the technician read from his instruments. Duration of contact, 0.7 seconds. Effect, complete neural shutdown of the target's primary weapon system. Zethvar's mandibles clicked together in a pattern that indicated deep thought. 2.3 pounds of pressure. A Chumari child could apply more force by accident. "Yes, Commander." But the placement. The technician highlighted the exact position where Marcus had touched the Vorthax arm. It corresponds to a major nerve cluster that most medical databases don't even map for species outside the Vorthax-owned civilization. That was the heart of the mystery. The consortium maintained the galaxy's most comprehensive database of xenobiology, accumulated over centuries of contact with hundreds of different species. Even their files didn't contain the level of anatomical detail that would be required to perform what Marcus had done. The knowledge he displayed shouldn't have existed outside of classified military research. What do we know about this human? Zethvar asked, though she was already familiar with the answer. Marcus Chun, born on Earth's Sol system, age 34 standard years. Occupation listed as independent trader, specializing in cultural artifacts. Clean record, no military service, no advanced education in medicine or biology. Completely unremarkable. The technician paused, his expression suggesting there was more to the story. Commander, there is one anomaly. Explain. His travel patterns over the past 2 years. He's visited 47 different systems, including several that are restricted to military personnel or diplomatic corps. His cargo manifests show cultural artifacts and educational materials, but some of his destinations don't have any established cultural exchange programs. Zethvar studied the holographic star map that appeared above the table, showing Marcus's travel route as a complex web of lines connecting dozens of worlds. To most observers, it would look like the random wanderings of a trader following whatever opportunities presented themselves. But there was a pattern there, subtle but unmistakable to someone trained in intelligence analysis. He's been studying us, she said quietly. Not trading, studying. The technician's compound eyes widened. Commander, look at the pattern. He's not visiting worlds for their trade value. He's visiting them for their biological diversity. Every major species in the consortium, plus several from outside our territory. He's been building a comprehensive database of xenobiology. The implications hit both of them simultaneously. If one human could acquire that level of knowledge, what could an entire civilization accomplish? The Galactic Council had classified humanity as a minor species, partly because of their physical limitations, but mostly because they seemed content to occupy a small corner of space and engage in simple trade relationships. If that assessment was wrong, a soft chime indicated an incoming priority message. Zethvar activated the communication link, and the blue tinge hologram of Admiral Karath appeared above her workstation. The Admiral was Hegemony Military, one of the few beings in the galaxy authorized to coordinate between the major powers when threats to galactic stability emerged. Commander Zethvar, the Admiral's voice carried the distinctive harmonic undertones of a species. I understand you're investigating the incident involving the human designated Marcus Chun. Yes, Admiral. We believe there may be more to this situation than initially apparent. Indeed, I'm transmitting classified intelligence that has just come to our attention. You'll find it disturbing. The data package arrived moments later, and Zethvar's expression grew increasingly grim as she reviewed its contents. Reports from across the galaxy. Incidents that have been dismissed as anomalies or filed away as unsolved mysteries. Humans appearing in places they shouldn't be able to reach. Human traders asking questions about topics far outside their supposed expertise. Human scholars requesting access to archives that should have been beyond their clearance level. Admiral, Zethvar said slowly, how many of these incidents are we looking at? Our preliminary count is over 300 documented cases in the past 5 years, all involving humans displaying capabilities or knowledge that their species profile suggests they shouldn't possess. The Admiral's hologram leaned forward, his expression grave. Commander, what if humanity's classification as a minor species wasn't an oversight? What if it was intentional misdirection? The question hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Zethvar thought about the precise way Marcus had disabled a Vorthack warrior, the casual confidence with which he'd explained his actions. There had been nothing improvised about his performance. It had been the work of someone following a well-practiced protocol. Permission to expand the investigation. Admiral, granted. Priority 1 classification. Use whatever resources you need. The hologram flickered and disappeared, leaving Zethvar alone with her technician and a growing sense that they were standing on the edge of a revelation that would change everything. Meanwhile, 47 light-years away, Marcus Chun was demonstrating why that sense of unease was entirely justified. The planet Zirion Prime served as a major hub for the Free World Alliance, its orbital stations processing trade from dozens of frontier systems. Marcus's ship had docked at Port 7 under the cover identity of a cultural researcher studying primitive art forms. His cargo manifest listed him as carrying samples of human sculpture and painting to trade for examples of local artistic traditions. In reality, he was meeting with Dr. Sarah Kim, ostensibly another cultural researcher, but actually one of the most advanced xenobiologists humanity had ever produced. They met in a small cafe overlooking the planet's crimson sunset, just two humans enjoying an evening meal while discussing academic matters. The Zirion natives have a fascinating neural structure, Dr. Kim said, her voice carrying the enthusiasm of a true scholar. To any eavesdropper, she would sound like a researcher excited about her latest discovery. Their cognitive processes are distributed across 3 separate brain chambers, each specialized for different types of thinking. Marcus nodded, cutting into his meal with the practiced attention of someone who had learned to appreciate cuisine from dozens of different worlds. That must create interesting vulnerabilities. Oh yes, disrupt the connection between the primary and secondary chambers, and their ability to process spatial relationships disappears entirely. They become essentially helpless. They continued their dinner, 2 academics sharing professional insights while the sun set behind them in a blaze of alien colors. Neither mentioned the fact that the research they were discussing could be used to neutralize one of the Free World Alliance's most important member species. Neither acknowledged that their conversation was actually a debriefing session for humanity's largest intelligence-gathering operation in galactic history. Dr. Kim reached into her bag and withdrew a data crystal, placing on the table next to the condiment dispenser. The latest findings from the Rigel expedition. 12 new species, all cataloged with full biological profiles. Marcus palmed the crystal with the casual skill of someone who had done this hundreds of times before. Any significant discoveries? The Andorian Empire's shock troops turn out to have a rather exploitable weakness in their cardiovascular system. Apply pressure to the right point, and their enhanced strength becomes a liability rather than an advantage. They finish their meal in comfortable silence. 2 humans enjoying each other's company in a galaxy where their species was considered barely worth noticing. As they prepare to leave, Dr. Kim mentioned casually that she would be traveling to the core worlds next, continuing her research into artistic traditions. Safe travels, Marcus replied, and meant it. The work they were doing was dangerous in ways that most people couldn't imagine. If the galactic community ever realized what humans have been up to, the reaction would be swift and brutal. As Dr. Kim disappeared into the evening crowd, Marcus made his way back toward the spaceport. His ship would be departing in a few hours, heading for another system where another human would be conducting another research project that had nothing to do with trade or cultural exchange. Behind him, automated surveillance systems recorded his movement through the station, cataloging his presence as just another minor entry in the vast database of interstellar travelers. The systems weren't sophisticated enough to detect the encrypted transmissions his ship had been sending and receiving, or to analyze the subtle patterns in his travel that would have revealed the true scope of humanity's activities. On Nexus Station, Commander Zethvar was beginning to piece together those patterns, but she was still thinking in terms of a single anomalous human rather than a species-wide intelligence operation. The truth was larger than even her considerable imagination could grasp. Humanity had been playing a very long game. For nearly 2 centuries, ever since first contact with the Galactic Council, humans had presented themselves as exactly what they appear to be, a relatively weak species with no natural advantages, content to find their niche in the galactic economy through adaptability and willingness to perform services that other species found beneath them. They had been model citizens, never causing trouble, never making demands, never appearing to pose any kind of threat. What the galaxy didn't know was that humans had been using that time to conduct the largest intelligence-gathering operation in recorded history. Every human trader, every human scholar, every human cultural attaché had been part of a vast network designed to map the biological, technological, and cultural weaknesses of every species they encountered. The project had started small, a few xenobiology students asking innocent questions, some cultural researchers requesting access to historical archives, traders who seemed unusually interested in the scientific capabilities of their customers. Over decades, it had grown into something unprecedented, a comprehensive database of how to neutralize any potential threat to human survival. Marcus's performance in the Rusty Comet hadn't been the result of lucky knowledge or natural talent. It had been the application of 2 centuries of systematic research into how to defeat beings who were individually more powerful than any human could ever hope to be. And Marcus was just one agent among thousands. As his ship lifted off from Zirian Prime and began its journey toward the next system on his route, Marcus activated his ship's long-range communication array. The message he sent was brief and encrypted with codes that changed daily. Phase 2 data collected. Moving to Phase 3 locations. The response came from a relay station hidden among the asteroids of an uninhabited system. Acknowledged. Intelligence suggests investigation has begun. Accelerate timeline if possible. Marcus studied the latest intelligence reports that arrived with the message. Commander Zethvar was indeed closing in on the truth, but she was still thinking too small. She was looking for a conspiracy involving dozens of humans, maybe a few hundred at most. She wasn't prepared to discover that she was facing an entire species that had spent 2 centuries preparing for war. Because that's what this had always been about, beneath all the peaceful trade relationships and cultural exchanges. Humanity had learned a hard lesson from their own history. In a universe full of predators, the only way to survive was to be the most dangerous predator of all. The other species thought they knew what humans were capable of. They were about to learn how wrong they could be. As Marcus's ship entered hyperspace, the blue tunnel of folded space-time stretched before him like a pathway to the future. Somewhere behind him, investigators were beginning to realize that they weren't just dealing with an unusual human. They were uncovering evidence of something that would challenge every assumption the galaxy had made about humanity's place in the cosmic order. The game was accelerating, and soon everyone would be forced to play by humanity's rules. The emergency session of the Galactic Security Council convened in the neutral territory of Babylon Station, a massive orbital platform that served as the unofficial capital of interspecies diplomacy. Representatives from 12 major civilizations gathered in the council chamber, their various environmental requirements met by sophisticated life support systems that could accommodate everything from methane-breathing Zephyrians to the crystalline entities known as the Mindful. Commander Zethvar stood before the assembled delegates, her investigation files projected in holographic detail above the council table. The evidence she had gathered over the past 2 weeks painted a picture that challenged fundamental assumptions about humanity's role in galactic civilization. Honorable representatives, she began, her 4 eyes scanning the diverse assembly. What we initially believed to be an isolated incident has revealed itself to be part of something far larger and more organized than any single human's enhanced knowledge. The holographic display shifted to show a star map dotted with thousands of red markers, each representing a documented case of humans displaying capabilities beyond their supposed limitations. The pattern was undeniable, a systematic, galaxy-wide intelligence operation that had been running for over 2 centuries. Ambassador Thylak of the Hegemony, a being whose species had evolved from apex predators on a world where everything tried to eat everything else, leaned forward in his specialized chair. His voice carried the kind of skeptical authority that came from a lifetime of military service. Commander Zethvar, you're asking us to believe that a species we've classified as barely capable of defending their own homeworld has been conducting espionage operations against every major civilization in the galaxy. That's exactly what I'm asking you to believe, Ambassador, because that's what the evidence shows. Zethvar manipulated the holographic controls, zooming in on specific cases. Dr. Elena Vasquez, supposedly a linguist studying ancient hegemony dialects, spent 6 months on your homeworld gaining access to your military academy's tactical training libraries. Professor James Morrison, allegedly researching consortium trade practices, somehow acquired detailed schematics of your defensive installations. Maria Santos, ostensibly a cultural attaché, spent 2 years learning the precise neural pathways that control your species' natural weapons. The silence in the chamber was profound. Each representative was thinking about the humans they had encountered in their own territories, the quiet traders and scholars who had seemed so harmless, so eager to learn, and so grateful for any assistance offered. Ambassador Viridian of the Crystalline Collective spoke next, her voice resonating through the chamber's mineral composition conductors. Her species communicated through harmonic vibrations, and the translation systems rendered her words with an otherworldly musical quality. The implications are staggering. If humans have been gathering this level of intelligence for 2 centuries, they must know more about our capabilities and weaknesses than we know about ourselves. That's the assessment of our analysis team, Zethvar confirmed. But it gets worse. The holographic display shifted again, showing a timeline of human expansion into galactic society. What had appeared to be random settlement patterns revealed themselves as strategically placed observation posts, with human colonies established at key hyperspace junctions and communication relay points. They haven't just been studying us, Zethvar continued. They've been positioning themselves to observe and potentially disrupt our communications, our trade routes, and our military movements. General Korvash of the Vorthak Empire slammed his massive fist onto the table, his species' natural volatility overriding diplomatic protocol. Impossible. My intelligence services would have detected such a massive operation. Humans are weak, disorganized. Are they, General? Zethvar interrupted smoothly. Let me show you what happened when we try to locate and interrogate Marcus Chun. A new hologram appeared, showing surveillance footage from the spaceport where Marcus's ship had been docked after the Nexus Station incident. The timestamp showed 3 days ago, exactly when consortium agents had arrived to detain him for questioning. The footage showed Marcus walking calmly through the spaceport concourse, apparently unaware that a 6-agent surveillance team was tracking his movements. He stopped at a newsstand, bought a data pad, and continued toward his ship's docking bay. Then, the interesting part began. As Marcus approached the security checkpoint before his docking bay, he paused to read something on his newly purchased datapad. Whatever message he received caused him to alter his route slightly, taking a detour through the station's shopping district. "Watch the timestamp," Zethvar said. The surveillance team followed, maintaining their careful distance. But as they moved through the crowds, something subtle began to happen. Other humans in the area, shoppers, maintenance workers, station personnel, began moving in ways that seemed random, but that gradually created obstacles for the surveillance team. A maintenance worker's gravity loader developed a sudden malfunction, blocking a crucial corridor. A group of human tourists asked for directions at exactly the right moment to break line of sight. A merchant's display stand somehow toppled over, creating confusion at a critical junction. None of these humans appeared to be in communication with Marcus Chun, Zethvar explained. But they responded to his presence as if following a coordinated plan. The surveillance team lost track of Marcus in the shopping district. By the time they reached his docking bay, his ship was gone, having departed on a filed flight plan that listed his destination as a mining colony in an adjacent sector. When our agents arrived at the mining colony, Zethvar continued, there was no record of Marcus Chen's ship ever having docked there. The implications hung in the air like a toxic cloud. The assembled representatives were beginning to understand that they weren't just dealing with espionage. They were dealing with a level of organization that suggested humanity had been playing an entirely different game than anyone realized. Ambassador Kretak of the Outer Rim Confederation, whose species had evolved sophisticated pattern recognition abilities, was the first to voice what everyone was thinking. Commander, what you're describing suggests that every human we've encountered over the past 2 centuries has been part of this operation. That would mean millions of individuals coordinating across hundreds of worlds with a level of precision that our own intelligence services couldn't achieve. That's exactly what it means, Ambassador. The holographic display changed once more, showing a new set of data that made the previous revelations seem minor by comparison. Network analysis charts appeared, mapping communication patterns between human settlements that had previously appeared unrelated. We've detected a quantum entanglement communication network linking every human colony and outpost in the galaxy. The technology required for this network is at least 50 years ahead of what humans have officially developed. General Korvash's bone ridges rattled with agitation. You're saying they've been lying about their technological capabilities as well? Not lying, Zethvar corrected. Misdirecting. They've allowed us to see only the technology they wanted us to see, while keeping their real capabilities hidden. The truth was beginning to sink in for the assembled representatives. Humanity hadn't been a minor species struggling to find its place in galactic civilization. They had been the galaxy's most successful intelligence operation, hiding in plain sight while gathering the information they would need to neutralize any potential threat. Dr. Keth Moran, the consortium's chief xenobiologist, accessed the chamber's communication systems and pulled up humanity's official species profile. The document that appeared was the same one that had been used to classify humans for over a century. Weak physical capabilities, known natural weapons, limited technological development, poses no significant threat to galactic stability. Ladies, gentlemen, and distinguished entities, Dr. Keth Moran said in the synthesized voice that his species used for interspecies communication, I believe we need to completely reevaluate everything we thought we knew about human capabilities. As if summoned by the discussion, an urgent priority message arrived for the Council. The communication came from Admiral Karath, who had been coordinating the investigation across multiple jurisdictions. The Admiral's hologram appeared above the Council table, his expression grim. Representatives, we have a situation. 3 hours ago, every human in consortium space simultaneously received the same quantum-encrypted message. We haven't been able to break the encryption, but the response has been immediate and coordinated. What kind of response? They're leaving. All of them. Every human trader, scholar, cultural attaché, and settlement representative has filed departure plans. They're evacuating from every major world in the galaxy simultaneously. The council chamber erupted into a chaos of overlapping voices as representatives began demanding explanations, calling for immediate action, and trying to contact their homeworld governments. The implications were staggering. If humans were withdrawing from galactic society, it could only mean that whatever game they had been playing was about to enter a new phase. Commander Zethvar managed to restore order by activating the chamber's priority communication systems. Admiral, what's the estimated timeline for this evacuation? Based on current departure rates, all human personnel will be clear of non-human space within 72 hours. The precision of the operation was breathtaking. Across hundreds of worlds, millions of humans were executing a coordinated withdrawal that had obviously been planned down to the smallest detail. Transport ships were arriving at exactly the right moments. Departure clearances were being processed with impossible efficiency, and the entire operation was proceeding without apparent communication delays despite the vast distances involved. They've been preparing for this for decades, Dr. Keth Moran realized aloud. The evacuation isn't improvised. It's been ready to execute at a moment's notice. Ambassador Viridian's harmonic voice carried a new note of concern. If they're withdrawing from our space, What are they withdrawing to? It was Admiral Karath who provided the answer, and it wasn't reassuring. Long-range sensors have detected massive energy signatures from human space. Ships coming online, defensive installations powering up, and something else. Massive construction projects that our intelligence suggested were civilian infrastructure are revealing themselves as military installations. The truth was finally becoming clear, and it was more disturbing than any of the assembled representatives had imagined. Humanity hadn't been hiding among the galactic community to avoid conflict. They had been using the time to prepare for it. How long? Ambassador Thylak asked quietly. Do we have before they're ready to act on whatever intelligence they've gathered? The answer came not from any of the officials in the chamber, but from a new holographic projection that appeared without authorization above the council table. The image resolved into a human figure, a woman in her 50s with graying hair and the kind of confident bearing that came from a lifetime of command authority. Hello, she said in perfect galactic standard, though her accent was distinctly human. I'm Director Sarah Chun of the Human Strategic Intelligence Division. I believe we need to talk. The fact that she could project herself into the most secure chamber in neutral space demonstrated a level of technological capability that officially didn't exist in human space. The fact that she had chosen to reveal herself now suggested that whatever phase of their Operation Humanity was entering next, stealth was no longer required. Director Chin, Commander Zethvar said, recovering from her shock more quickly than the other representatives, we have questions. I'm sure you do, Director Chin replied with a slight smile, and I prepare to answer them. But first, you should know that what you've discovered so far is just the beginning. The intelligence operation you've uncovered was never the end goal. It was the preparation phase. She paused, letting it sink in. We know exactly how to neutralize every species represented in this chamber. We know your military capabilities, your technological limits, your biological vulnerabilities, and your social structures. We know because we've spent 2 centuries learning everything there is to know about you. The silence was absolute. Even the chamber's environmental systems seemed to have gone quiet. The question now, Director Chin continued, is what we're going to do with that knowledge. And that, representatives, depends entirely on what happens in the next few hours. The holographic projection flickered and stabilized, waiting for a response. Around the council table, representatives of the galaxy's most powerful civilizations found themselves in the unprecedented position of being completely outmaneuvered by a species they had dismissed as harmless. The game was changing, and humanity was no longer pretending to be weak. Director Sarah Chin's holographic image remained steady above the council table as the representatives struggled to process the magnitude of what they had just learned. The silence stretched for nearly a full minute before Ambassador Thylak managed to find his voice. Director Chun, what exactly are you proposing? I'm not proposing anything yet, Ambassador. First, I need to correct some fundamental misconceptions you have about humanity and our place in this galaxy. Her expression remained pleasant, but there was something in her eyes that suggested the friendly demeanor was a carefully maintained facade. For over 2 centuries, your civilizations have operated under the assumption that you represent the apex of galactic evolution. The Vorthack with your natural armor and weapons, the Chumari with your enhanced sensory capabilities, the Hegemony with your technological superiority. Each species has found its niche in the galactic ecosystem based on inherent advantages that evolution provided. The holographic display above the table shifted, showing a complex diagram of galactic civilization as it currently existed: trade routes, military alliances, territorial boundaries, and resource distribution networks. What you fail to understand is that evolution didn't stop with physical and technological advantages. In humanity's case, it took a very different direction. Director Chun manipulated the display remotely, highlighting patterns that the assembled representatives had never noticed before. Human settlements weren't randomly distributed across the galaxy. They formed a network that touched every major trade route, every strategic resource, every critical communication relay. You see, humans evolved something that no other species in this galaxy has developed: the ability to become anything we need to be. Commander Zethvar leaned forward, her analytical mind trying to grasp the implications. Director, what do you mean by become anything? I mean exactly that, Commander. The human you met on Nexus Station, Marcus Chun, demonstrated knowledge of Vorthack anatomy because he had spent 6 months studying with Vorthack medical specialists. He spoke like an academic because he has advanced degrees in xenobiology from 3 different universities. He moved like a martial artist because he trained with the best combat instructors from a dozen different species. The display zoomed in on Marcus's profile, revealing details that hadn't been visible in the standard intelligence files. Multiple educational credentials, training certificates from military academies across the galaxy, cultural immersion programs on worlds that most humans had never even heard of. But that's impossible, General Korvash protested. No single individual could acquire that level of expertise in so many different fields. You're thinking like a Vorthack, General. Your species values specialization, becoming the best possible warrior, the most efficient hunter, the most effective leader in your particular role. Humans value adaptability above all else. Director Chen's image smiled, and for the first time, the representatives caught a glimpse of what was truly frightening about humanity. It wasn't malice or aggression. It was the complete confidence of a species that had spent centuries preparing for this conversation. Let me tell you what really happened when your investigators tried to track down Marcus Chun. The holographic display showed new footage, surveillance camera angles that the consortium agents hadn't had access to. The same scene in the shopping district, but now with enhanced analysis that revealed details the original investigation had missed. You assumed the other humans in the area were responding to some kind of covert signal or communication system. The truth is much simpler and much more disturbing. They were responding to Marcus because every human in that crowd was trained to respond to him. The footage slowed down, highlighting subtle gestures and movements that had passed unnoticed in the original analysis. Marcus's pause at the newsstand hadn't been to read a message. It had been to make a specific hand gesture that every human in visual range understood. The maintenance workers' equipment failure, the tourist group's request for directions, the merchant's toppled display, all of it had been improvised responses to a simple signal. Every human you've encountered over the past 2 centuries has been trained in intelligence operations, combat techniques, technological analysis, and cultural integration. What you've classified as humans being naturally adaptable is actually the result of the most comprehensive training program in galactic history. Dr. Keth Moran processed this information with the methodical precision of a species. Director Chun, are you telling us that every human is essentially a trained intelligence operative? Not essentially, Doctor. Literally. Every human citizen undergoes minimum 15 years of what you would classify as advanced military and intelligence training, what we call basic education. The implications crashed over the council chamber like a tidal wave. If every human was trained to the level that galactic militaries required for their elite special forces, then humanity's true population numbers took on an entirely different significance. Ambassador Viridian's harmonic voice carried new undertones of concern. How many humans are there, Director? Current population stands at approximately 47 billion across 312 worlds and orbital installations. The number hit the assembled representatives like a physical blow. According to galactic records, human population had been estimated at less than 10 billion, spread across perhaps 50 worlds. If Director Chan was correct, then humanity was not only more capable than anyone had realized, they were also far more numerous. You've been hiding entire civilizations from us, Ambassador Kretak said, his pattern recognition abilities finally putting together the scope of the deception. Hidden is the wrong word. Director Chin corrected. We've been maintaining operational security. There's a significant difference. The holographic display expanded to show the true extent of human space. Not the small cluster of systems that appeared on galactic maps, but a vast network of inhabited worlds, industrial complexes, research stations, and military installations that stretched across significant portions of the galaxy. Our official territory represents approximately 12% of actual human-controlled space. The remaining 88% has been developed using resources and technologies acquired through our intelligence operations. General Corvash stood abruptly, his massive frame radiating the kind of aggressive posture that preceded violence. This is an act of war. You've been spying on us, stealing from us, lying to us for centuries. General, Director Chen's voice remained calm. We've been surviving, and now we're offering you the opportunity to do the same. The general's bone ridges rattled with confusion. What do you mean? Instead of answering immediately, Director Chen activated another display. This one showed a three-dimensional map of the galaxy, but with details that no existing civilization had ever seen before. Regions of space that galactic charts listed as unexplored or uninhabitable were revealed to contain massive technological constructs and energy signatures. Ladies, gentlemen, and distinguished entities, I'd like you to meet your neighbors. The map zoomed in on the galactic rim, showing structures that dwarfed anything that known civilizations had built. Massive orbital installations, artificial worlds, and what appear to be ships the size of moons moved through regions that existing star charts marked as empty space. The galaxy is much more crowded than you realize. What you've classified as the extent of intelligent life represents approximately 30% of the actual civilizations in this galactic region. Commander Zethvar's four eyes focused on the display with intensity that was painful to watch. You're saying there are other civilizations that we haven't detected? I'm saying there are other civilizations that have chosen not to be detected. Some of them have been watching galactic development for thousands of years. Others are relatively recent arrivals from neighboring galaxies. All of them are significantly more advanced than current galactic standard. The display highlighted specific regions, showing energy signatures that registered at levels that existing technology couldn't achieve. Cities that spanned entire star systems, transportation networks that moved faster than hyperspace, industrial complexes that processed the output of multiple suns. The current galactic community represents what these civilizations consider to be the nursery species, intelligent life that has achieved space travel but hasn't yet developed the capabilities necessary for true galactic citizenship. Dr. Keth Moran's synthesized voice carried a new note of uncertainty. Director Chun, what constitutes true galactic citizenship? The ability to survive contact with civilizations that consider your current capabilities to be roughly equivalent to stone tools and fire. The silence that followed was profound. Every representative in the chamber was beginning to understand that the political and military calculations that governed their civilizations were based on a completely false understanding of the galactic situation. 3 months from now, Director Chun continued, the isolation protocols that have protected this region of space will expire. The civilizations you see on this map will begin direct contact with current galactic inhabitants. Based on historical precedent, species that can't demonstrate advanced capabilities will be absorbed. Ambassador Thylak found his voice first. What kind of capabilities? The kind that humans have spent 2 centuries developing. Military technologies based on detailed knowledge of potential enemy capabilities. Defensive systems that can't be defeated by conventional attacks. Social structures that can't be destabilized by cultural infiltration. Industrial capacity that can support extended conflict. The display showed new images, weapon systems that could neutralize entire fleets, defensive installations that existed partially outside normal space-time, manufacturing complexes that could build starships in a matter of hours rather than months. You see, representatives, the intelligence operation you've discovered was never about preparing to attack your civilizations. It was about preparing to defend them. The revelation hit the chamber like a shockwave. Humanity hadn't been gathering intelligence to exploit the galaxy's established powers. They had been gathering it to prepare for something much worse. The advanced civilizations don't make distinctions between species when they evaluate a region for absorption, Director Chen explained. They evaluate the region as a whole. If the dominant species can't demonstrate sufficient advancement, everything in the area gets recycled. General Corvash sank back in his chair, the aggressive posture draining from his massive frame. You're saying that all of our civilizations are under threat. I'm saying that all of our civilizations have been under threat for centuries. Humanity has been preparing to meet that threat on behalf of everyone in this galactic region. The holographic display shifted once more, showing defensive installations and fleet positions that surrounded the entire known galaxy. Ships that registered as human design, but were clearly built using technologies far beyond anything that existed in galactic databases. We've been building a defensive network that can protect this entire region when the isolation protocols expire. But it won't work unless every major civilization in the area can contribute to the effort. Commander Zethvar was beginning to understand the scope of what humanity had accomplished. Director, what do you need from us? Complete integration of your military forces under human strategic command. Full technology sharing to bring your capabilities up to minimum defensive standards. And absolute trust that we're acting in everyone's best interests. The request was staggering in its implications. Director Chun was asking the galaxy's major powers to essentially surrender their sovereignty to a species they had considered barely capable of defending themselves. The alternative, she continued, is that in 3 months, you'll have the opportunity to explain to our new galactic neighbors why you weren't prepared to meet them. As if summoned by her words, new energy signatures appeared on the display. Massive objects moving through the intergalactic void, approaching the galaxy's outer rim at speeds that suggested technologies that operated on principles unknown to existing science. They're early, Director Chen said, and for the first time since the conversation began, her calm demeanor showed a crack. We have 6 weeks instead of 3 months. Around the council table, representatives of civilizations that had considered themselves the apex of galactic evolution began to realize that they were about to become very junior partners in a much larger game. The true revelation wasn't that humans had been hiding their capabilities. It was that they had been preparing to save everyone else. The transformation of galactic civilization began within hours of Director Chen's revelation. Across hundreds of worlds, the carefully maintained illusion of human weakness dissolved as the most extensive deception in galactic history finally ended. On Consortium Prime, Admiral Karath watched through his office viewport as human transport ships that had been listed as carrying cultural artifacts revealed their true cargo. Advanced defense platforms unfolded from vessels that sensors had identified as civilian freighters. Technologies that were decades ahead of Consortium standard began establishing orbital installations with a speed that suggested the construction had been planned down to the minute. Similar scenes were playing out across the galaxy as humanity's true industrial capacity became visible for the first time. What had appeared to be modest human colonies revealed themselves as sophisticated military installations. Trading posts became communication relay centers for networks that operated faster than existing hyperspace technology should have allowed. In the emergency session that continued on Babylon Station, the galactic representatives were receiving updates that challenged everything they thought they knew about the strategic balance of power. Director Chen, Ambassador Thylak said, studying reports from his homeworld with growing amazement. Our security services are detecting human installations in our space that we never knew existed. Some of them are larger than our primary military bases. Those installations have been protecting your shipping lanes for the past 50 years, Director Chen replied. Her holographic presence had remained constant throughout the 12 hours of continuous briefings that had followed her initial revelation. The pirate attacks that had been mysteriously unsuccessful, the raiders who disappeared without trace, the trade route accidents that always seemed to happen to ships carrying weapons or advanced technology. That was us. General Corvash looked up from a tactical display that showed the true disposition of human forces throughout Vortex space. You've been fighting our wars for us without us even knowing there was a war. Not fighting them, General, preventing them. The civilizations that are approaching don't just evaluate current military capabilities. They look at conflict patterns, resource utilization efficiency, and social stability indicators. Species that waste resources on internal conflicts don't meet their criteria for preservation. Dr. Keth Moran had been analyzing the technological specifications that human engineers were sharing with their counterparts across the galaxy. Director, some of these designs are incorporating principles that our physics models suggest shouldn't be possible. Your physics models are approximately 2 centuries behind current understanding, Doctor. That's not a criticism. It's the result of humanity maintaining operational security. We've been sharing technological advances very carefully to avoid destabilizing existing social structures. Commander Zethvar, who had spent weeks trying to unravel the mystery of human capabilities, was beginning to understand the true scope of what her species had missed. How long have you known about the approaching civilizations? We've been in contact with them for approximately 130 years. The statement landed like a bomb in the council chamber. Representatives who had been struggling to accept humanity's advanced technology were now faced with the revelation that humans had been conducting diplomatic relations with civilizations beyond anything they had imagined possible. Contact. Ambassador Viridian's harmonic voice carried overtones that the translation systems struggled to render. You've been in communication with them? Limited communication, yes. The isolation protocols I mentioned aren't arbitrary. They're negotiated agreements. Advanced civilizations recognize that younger species need time to develop before they can participate safely in galactic community activities. Director Chun manipulated the holographic display to show communication logs that documented decades of carefully managed interaction between humanity and beings whose capabilities were represented in mathematical notation that most galactic species couldn't interpret. The agreements specify that regional development cannot be interfered with until local species reach certain technological and social benchmarks. However, if those benchmarks aren't met by the protocol expiration date, the region becomes available for resource reclamation. Resource reclamation, General Korvash repeated slowly. You mean they'll strip mine our worlds? I mean they'll optimize the region for maximum utility. Inhabited worlds will be reconfigured for different purposes. Existing populations will be relocated to environments that better suit their biological requirements. What you consider your civilizations will cease to exist as independent entities. The clinical language couldn't disguise the magnitude of what Director Chan was describing. The approaching civilizations weren't planning conquest in any traditional sense. They were planning reorganization on a scale that would make individual species irrelevant. Unless, she continued, we can demonstrate that this region has developed sufficiently to merit inclusion as junior partners rather than managed resources. Ambassador Kreetak, whose pattern recognition abilities had been overwhelmed by the scope of information they were receiving, asked the question that everyone was thinking. Director Chun, what exactly are we being asked to become junior partners in? The holographic display expanded beyond the local galactic region, showing star charts that encompassed neighboring galaxies and the vast network of civilizations that connected them. Structures that spanned intergalactic space, transportation networks that moved between galaxies as easily as current technology moved between star systems, projects that manipulated the fundamental forces of cosmology. The cooperative, Director Chun said simply, a confederation of civilizations that spans approximately 43% of the observable universe. They've been developing for roughly 12 million years, and they've learned that the most efficient way to manage galactic development is through guided partnership rather than direct control. The numbers were beyond the comprehension of beings whose civilizations were measured in mere thousands of years. Dr. Keth Moran attempted to process the implications and found his analytical systems overwhelmed. Director, what would partnership entail? Integration into cooperative defense networks, sharing of technological development, participation in resource management on a galactic scale, and gradual transition to post-scarcity economics. In practical terms, it means that every species in this region would become part of something larger while maintaining their cultural and biological distinctiveness. And if we refuse? Ambassador Thylak asked. Refusal isn't really an option at this point. The choice is between partnership and absorption. What I'm offering is the opportunity to enter the cooperative as recognized civilizations rather than as reclaimed resources. Commander Zethvar reviewed the military analyses that were coming in from across the galaxy as human defensive installations came online. Director, our preliminary assessment suggests that your defensive capabilities are sufficient to resist almost any conceivable attack. Why do you need our cooperation if you can defend the region independently? Because defense isn't the goal, Commander. The goal is advancement. The cooperative doesn't just protect younger species, it elevates them. But elevation requires willing participation. Forced advancement doesn't produce stable results. The display showed new images, civilizations that had successfully transitioned to cooperative membership, their societies transformed in ways that enhanced rather than diminished their fundamental characteristics. Worlds where scarcity had been eliminated, where individual potential could be fully realized, where the limitations of single-species perspective have been transcended without losing cultural identity. What you see as our deception was actually our preparation. Humanity has been developing the capabilities necessary to serve as intermediaries between existing galactic civilizations and the cooperative. We've studied every species in this region because we need to understand how to help each of you transition successfully. General Korvash studied tactical assessments that showed human forces coordinating defensive preparations across dozens of worlds simultaneously. Director, the level of organization you're demonstrating, it's unlike anything we've seen. How do humans achieve this kind of coordination? For the first time since the conversation began, Director Chen's expression showed something other than professional competence. Something that might have been pride, or perhaps recognition of a fundamental truth that she had waited centuries to share. General, you asked earlier about humanity's evolutionary path. Let me show you what humans actually evolved to become. The display shifted to show neural activity patterns, not just individual human brain function, but network activity that connected multiple minds across vast distances. The patterns were unlike anything in existing xenobiology databases, showing levels of integration and coordination that approached a form of collective consciousness. Humans didn't evolve individual superiority like other species. We evolved the ability to function as a coordinated group organism while maintaining individual identity and autonomy. What you've been seeing as human capabilities aren't individual achievements. They're the result of 47 billion minds working together toward common goals. The revelation explained everything that had puzzled galactic observers about human society. They're apparently inefficient democratic processes that somehow produced remarkably consistent results. Their ability to coordinate complex operations across vast distances without apparent communication delays. Their willingness to sacrifice individual advantage for group benefit while still maintaining competitive drive and personal ambition. Every human is simultaneously an individual and part of a larger organism, Director Chun continued. We experience personal autonomy while participating in collective decision-making processes that operate below the threshold of conscious awareness. It's why human societies appear chaotic, but function with precision, why our individuals seem unremarkable, but our civilization accomplishes impossible things. Ambassador Viridian's harmonic voice carried new harmonics as her species' advanced understanding of resonance patterns allowed her to grasp implications that others were still processing. Director Chun, you're describing a form of biological quantum entanglement applied to consciousness. That's a reasonable approximation, yes. Human consciousness exists partially in normal space-time, and partially in quantum substrate that allows instantaneous information sharing across any distance. It's how we've coordinated operations across hundreds of star systems without detectable communication networks. Dr. Keth Moran's analytical processes had finally found a framework for understanding what he was observing. This is why human individuals can acquire seemingly impossible levels of expertise. They're not just learning through individual study. They're accessing the accumulated knowledge of their entire species. Every human has access to the experiences and knowledge of every other human, filtered through quantum consciousness networks that preserve individual personality while enabling collective problem-solving. Marcus Chun didn't just study Vortex anatomy. He had direct access to the neural patterns of human doctors who had spent decades working with your species. The scope of what humanity represented was finally becoming clear to the assembled representatives. Not just another species with advanced technology, but an entirely different kind of consciousness that had been hiding among them for centuries. The approaching cooperative civilizations recognized this kind of consciousness development as indicating readiness for advanced partnership, Director Chen explained. Humanity has achieved the basic requirements for cooperative membership. What we're offering is to extend that partnership to include all species in this galactic region. General Korvash looked around the chamber at representatives who were struggling to process revelations that challenged fundamental assumptions about consciousness, civilization, and their place in the universe. Director Chun, what happens now? Now, General, we find out whether the galaxy's species can evolve as rapidly as they'll need to. The approaching civilizations will arrive in 37 days. By then, we need to have integrated your military forces, upgraded your defensive capabilities, and demonstrated that this region can function as a cooperative entity. And if we can't, Director Chen's expression was gentle but implacable. Then, we'll do our best to ensure that absorption is as painless as possible for your populations. As the implications settled over the chamber, representatives began to understand that they weren't negotiating terms of alliance. They were being offered the chance to participate in their own transformation or to have that transformation imposed upon them. Humanity had spent 2 centuries preparing for this moment, not as conquerors seeking to dominate other species, but as intermediaries helping to bridge the gap between galactic childhood and cosmic adulthood. The choice facing every civilization was simple: evolve or be evolved. The timer was running, and the galaxy was about to discover what it meant to grow up. In the days that followed, as human technologies began transforming defensive capabilities across hundreds of worlds, and human advisors worked to integrate military forces that had never cooperated before, one truth became clear to everyone involved. Underestimating humanity had indeed gone wrong, but not in the way anyone had expected. The galaxy's greatest error hadn't been in failing to recognize human strength. It had been in failing to recognize human compassion. Because when the time came to choose between protecting themselves and protecting everyone else, humanity had chosen to risk everything on the possibility that their galactic neighbors could be saved. As the approaching ships drew closer and defensive preparations reached completion, 47 billion human minds turned their attention to the greatest challenge they had ever faced, convincing the universe that this small corner of space had produced something worth preserving. The game was no longer about hiding humanity's true nature. It was about revealing what that nature could accomplish when it stopped pretending to be anything other than exactly what it was, a species that had evolved not to dominate the galaxy, but to save it.